Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Poole, and I'm the director at the Center of Excellence for Women's Health, and I'll be moderating today. And as you can see on the screen, we'll have two presenters, Lorraine Greaves, who's our senior investigator, and Carol Monas-Neves, the project coordinator on this project and a researcher with us. So we'll just start with the land acknowledgement. We'd, like to begin by acknowledging the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples as the first inhabitants and traditional custodians on the land in which we live, learn, and play. And today we're joining from really diverse places across Turtle Island, and the Center of Excellence for Women's Health Office is located on the unceded and traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, the Stolo, and the Musqueam nations. And as a center, we remain committed to honoring Indigenous knowledge systems as ways of knowing in our work. And in particular, we continue to focus on responding to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action and the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice. So I'm going to let you know about the amazing team who worked on this project. That includes Lorraine and Carol, but also Lindsay Wolfson, Chantel Cole, Darby Whitaker, Ella Huber, and Liv Schultz. And just before we go on, maybe we'll do a poll to get a bit of a sense of who you are and what your role is. So if we can start by... And that's great. I can't see the results of the poll, but hopefully, perhaps, Ella, can you see them, or Doug?
Yeah, so we have...
Here they are. Researchers, violence prevention practitioners, health and social service providers, media folks, and other. We got a nice balance of many, so thanks so much for that. We have one more question before we get going, which we'd just like to get a sense of where you're at in terms of this topic from today around a gender transformative practice. So maybe we can have the second question come up. And can we see the results from that one as well? I'm not seeing the results on screen, so who can? Carol, can you see
them, Nancy? Yes, and it looks like we have like a great bunch of participants who feel confident on how to practically apply gender transformative approaches. So the scale has numbers from 6 to 10, which is great. And we know more about what you know, so we can deliver this content.
Excellent. Well, I'll turn it over to you, Lorraine, to talk a bit about the goals.
Great, thanks, Nancy. We'll just see these goals for today. It's a real pleasure for me to be here talking to you about what really is the culmination of a huge project, which we're very excited about. However, we're going to start with just some basics about what gender transformative approaches are, and in particular, how they matter a lot to the primary prevention of violence against women and girls. But the real content today is to describe what we did in this project, which took almost 3 years and involved a huge number of other people, which we'll talk about in a minute. And culminating in the development of some actual messages for social media platforms that are aimed at preventing violence against women and girls, but that are also gender transformative. And then we'll discuss all the other products that we have produced over this period of time, and Carol will take you through those in some detail. But ultimately, we want to come back to this question of whether or not you think you would be able to create your own gender transformative messages, not just to prevent violence against women and girls, but perhaps to address many other issues. And then we'll have a Q&A. So that's what we're up to. We can roll along, please, Carol. As I said, almost a 3-year project. And we called the project Communicating Equality. This was funded by VAWG, by the federal government, and we're very appreciative for that funding. We were doing something that we felt was quite needed in Canada, and that was to really focus for a period of time on gender transformative thinking with respect to violence against women. And we were drawing on our experience with some key partners in Australia, VAWG, which is a pan-Australian organization that's devoted entirely to preventing violence against women and girls. And we had had a long partnership with them on other issues and other kinds of work. So it was a natural for us to look at their amazing work and say, how can we adapt that to Canada? And in so doing, not reinvent the wheel for Canada, but see how we can tweak and build and augment the work that they had done. So that was really the basis for this story. We engaged then with a whole number of people, huge number of people from Canada, journalists, communicators, violence prevention organizations, of course, and crucially, a lot of men's health groups and men's equity groups, to sort of talk in many different circles and ways about how this would work in Canada. So here's the giant list of who we have consulted with and who have been involved. Some of you are here today. We had a reference group, which was quite small, that involved VAWG, as you can see on the left there, and also involved Argyle Communications, with whom we work closely on the actual production of these messages you'll see soon. And also CanWatch, Eva BC, Informed Opinions, who is also here today, and Trauma at the Root, a project out of UBC that was addressing the issues around men and men's health, especially men who had previously been incarcerated. And then we had 3 ongoing communities of inquiry, and you can see the topics there. They met amongst themselves with our moderation and leadership, and we went to them regularly over this project to ask about their reactions to what we were doing, get direction and advice from them, get examples from them of things that they liked or didn't like out in the world, and talk about this central problem we had. How could we adapt or adopt some Australian materials and principles to Canada? And so we thank all of these people. As you can see, it was a giant list, and we appreciated every one of them. So the 3 main things that we have produced, we're going to just note here, but we're going to come back to them and talk to you about them in more detail. As I've mentioned already, the culminating product is on the left here, the social media messaging. And we've created 4 messages that incorporate gender transformative principles as well as drivers of violence against women and girls, and try and meld these 2 things together to inspire action on primary prevention. And we'll show all 4 of them to you later, but right now, we just want to show you the format. Carol's animating this very faded image that you see here that says under the mask. And then it turns into the action in a much more vibrant color, say something. This one's addressing bystanderism. It's addressing that concept of where men in particular, but certainly not just men, can see disrespect of women taking place in the community, as you can see here in this faded image. And we're asking men in particular to take responsibility with other men and say something. And so this aspect of bystanderism is one of 4 themes, and we'll show you all of them later. But this is the one of the products that we will be sending out on social media platforms of our own, and they will, we hope, be picked up on a range of other platforms as we go forward. In the middle, we've got a toolkit, and Carol will take you through the details of this later, but essentially this is to help others build capacity in this area and think more deeply about primary prevention that is also gender transformative. And we'll come back to that in a minute, but it has all kinds of components. And the teams worked really hard on creating these products, which we think will be very useful. And as I said earlier, really fill a niche in Canada that we thought needed filling. And then thirdly, not quite up, but soon to be this week, is an online training course that you can actually go through in an interactive way to support your work in thinking through how you deal with messaging, how you create it, how you manage it, what some of the do's and don'ts are, etc., and all for various contexts. So that's a real hands-on piece that we'll come to in a minute. So here was our primary problem. You know, we've had a lot over the years of reactive responses to violence against women, not just in Canada, but around the world. Lots of emergency responses, lots of capacity building in responders and the building of shelters, all kinds of things that are extremely important to improve women's safety in the moment. But one of the underlying problems is prevention. As we all know, violence against women continues. It's now called an epidemic in this country in various jurisdictions, and certainly it's an epidemic globally. On our website, Communicating Equality, you'll see some of the basic statistics about this. It's really a real fundamental and persistent social and health issue. So we wanted to dig into the primary prevention aspect. We were building on some of our own work in gender transformative thinking. Some of you may know that we had a project that culminated in the book, Making It Better, which analyzed gender transformative approaches to health promotion. And in that book, we created this chart that really summarizes the variety of possible responses that we can have to gender inequity, ranging from gender unequal, where we just perpetuate it and contribute to it, to gender blind, where we just ignore it, don't notice, just create a one-size-fits-all for everybody kind of health promotion or other kind of program. And then into the more hopeful, gender-sensitive and gender-specific areas where we do accommodate, but we don't necessarily dig into the root causes and offer root solution. So gender transformative obviously does that. It is an ideal, it's an aspiration, and it really was the theme of that book, Making It Better. About 3 years later, Nancy and I did the book Gender Unchained, and what it incorporated is a range of examples of gender transformative solutions to a wide range of problems, not just health promotion and not just violence against women, from around the world. And between the two of these, we've had an ongoing interest at the Center of Excellence in trying to figure out exactly how we can make more gender transformative action, activity, messaging, and so on in the world of health for women. And of course, it incorporates a number of things. I'm going to give you this example from equimundo.org, which is an organization that is a world leader in gender transformative work with men and boys. And you'll see throughout this, there is a real focus on the audience of men and boys. Certainly, though, it is not the only audience for gender transformative work. And we continue at the center to think through all the other audiences that need to understand gender transformative messages. But Equimundo, formerly called Promundo, you may be familiar with that, has created programs for young men, for young women, for groups around sexual and gender diversity, and more recently about fathering. And they're all available for you to look at if you haven't already, but they perhaps are a world leader. And what they're doing is challenging gender norms. There are lots of aspects of gender that we want to challenge. That is one. And on the left, it's my theme. And I just want to remind you that in doing this work, you need to have clarity, and that is to dig into the root causes so that you can apply root solutions. It also takes courage, and it's not being overly dramatic to say that, because it's not the standard way of doing things. And so sometimes you have to stick your neck out and ask hard questions and state a new vision. And you'll see some of that as we go along. And of course, on creativity, the creativity part, rethinking solutions, rethinking messages, really hard. It's not easy, and that's why we had so many people engaged with us in this project to help us do that, because that's not an easy jump. The next example is challenging gender relations, which is, a real health-focused example, but something we were involved with a group of researchers at UBC some years ago, which was ostensibly about reducing tobacco use. But what it became about in this product was a gender transformative approach to that particular time of life and that particular issue. And what we ended up doing was naming the dynamics of the relationship between members of heterosexual couples who were in this stage of life trying to reduce tobacco use. And naming those dynamics, which fell into 3 or 4 different categories, was the focus of this booklet, which then allowed women and men to see exactly what was going on in their relationship around this issue. It had a focus on gender equity. It was quite secondary, the issue around tobacco use and reduction. So there is yet another example of how we have applied gender transformative thinking through the years. There's lots of other examples in those books that I've just mentioned in some of our other work. So, pulling this forward, this is the equation: improving health, and in this case, preventing violence, improving gender equity at the same time, equals a gender transformative approach. And so this means we have to think about 2 themes, multitask, as we embed these messages together. So in preparation, we did all kinds of background research, including updating and reviewing the extensive research reviews and evidence reviews that Our Watch had done in 2015 and had done again in 2020. And they had produced massive amounts of background literature and review and analysis that had really surveyed the literature on this topic from around the world. So an extremely helpful basis, obviously, and that's what we wanted to build on. So in our case, we updated those summaries in 2023 in 2 areas: the academic evidence, and then secondarily, the gray literature. And we were looking specifically at what GT, or gender transformative approaches, had been taken in primary prevention. We found these 4 main themes on the right-hand side here. Just the one I've been talking about: transforming aspects of roles and norms and stereotypes, transforming masculinities, a key theme in this area, bystander issues, and 4th, mobilizing communities. And we have really focused on the 3 that we have in dark gold here in this project going forward. We think there's loads to do, and we're hoping that our messaging will perhaps mobilize communities in the future, but this is where we sat with the research. So This was our WAWG's framework. And again, essential to our thinking was their identification of these 4 main drivers that were gendered of violence against women. So the first one is just a general condoning of violence against women, which might take place in a society at large, where people just don't call out things that are disrespectful about women, or don't call out sexist ads, or don't call out unequal pay, or don't call out any of that kind of inequity that's staring us in the face. And the second one is men's control of decision-making. This is a bit more focused on gender relations, where we look at issues around women's autonomy and their ability to make decisions, move around a community freely, which of course has different manifestations in different communities and parts of the world and cultures. But you can see that there are threads of that in almost every situation. So in many of our communities in Canada, it might be that women don't feel safe moving around on their own at night, for example. And so that's a limitation. The third driver is the rigid gender stereotyping that really does support dominant forms of masculinity. And masculinities in general are one of those things that we've addressed in our messaging that we've created. And fourth, last but not least, is the peer relationships between men and boys that support the cultures of masculinity, that can not only emphasize aggression and control, which is sort of in some ways a superficial analysis of this, but also limit men's ability to be more expansive in their emotions and behavior than they might normally want to be. And that's a key aspect of breaking open some of these drivers. So that is our WAWG's framework. We took these 4 drivers to heart and we built upon them. So we ended up calling the 4 messages, which is just one part of our product, as you saw, Lift the Mask. And we created this in partnership with Argyle Communications. And there are a series of 4 messages that will promote understanding of these drivers, and we hope inspire action. So as I said earlier, like a lot of gender transformative work, our primary audience in this part is men and boys, but a secondary audience is women and girls and the general public. We're hoping that these messages resonate with almost everybody and make people think and maybe act. And the sub-themes within the 4 messages are standing by, or the bystanderism that I showed you, equal rights, which is more of the high-level inequity issues that women and men may measure up as unequal on, and rigid gender stereotyping, which can affect young children and often starts in childhood, and then the masculine norms that I've just mentioned. And as I mentioned earlier, these will be social media platforms that we'll use at first, and hopefully that will spread from there. So Carol will now just show you all 4 of these in a more slow rendition. And that's the first one, disrespecting women. The action is say something, and you can see the text beside each one just to show you what's being said here. So here's the one on equal rights, and it refers to safety. One on gender stereotypes. And the action here, be a model for change, a picture of a man with 2 boys. And then the 4th one is about masculinities. Asking men to consider shifting their own norms. So those are the 4 social media messages that we have come up with. And we'll be looking forward to your comments and responses later on as well. So Carol will now walk you through some of the other products that we have created in this project. Over to you.
Thanks, Lorraine. So everyone, as mentioned by Nancy, I'm the coordinator and one of the researchers for this project. And yeah, I'll just gonna tell you more about the toolkit and training that we created to support you and organizations in applying gender transformative approaches and in creating their own gender transformative messages. So the toolkit in particular, it includes a range of resources to support organizations working in specific contexts and with various audiences. So it kind of tries to bring this granularity to the work of doing GT approaches in very concrete settings and for specific audiences. The toolkit includes 5 context summaries, which review these initiatives in a range of settings that are considered crucial for primary prevention and gender equity work. It also includes 2 discussion guides on messaging, one about prevention messaging in general, and one about messaging with and for men and boys, and also reporting recommendations for the media, and 2 background research summaries that Lorraine showed you the covers and the results of this research earlier. So let's look at some of these resources in more detail. So in our research, we found 5 contexts that really stood out for us as crucial for primary prevention and gender equity work. And these contexts were the family, education institutions, workplaces, sports, and faith-based contexts. So we created these 5 resources to provide examples of promising gender transformative initiatives from around the world and from Canada when available, with the objective that the organizations working in these sectors could refer to these examples and utilize them in their work or adapt them or adopt them as it were for them. So all of these materials start with an overview of the need for primary prevention and gender equity work in these settings. It provides, it discusses studies, provides statistics and trends, and even news articles that build a compelling case for doing this. And that can be also used by organizations as they move forward in this work to present the need for doing this. Then the resources discuss examples of the initiatives developed in these specific settings and showcase messages created as part of these initiatives too when available. We wanted for this context to really ground what GT work can look like in this context and what the GT messages can look like in this context to inspire you, right? So the current slide shows one of the many examples discussed. In this case is the Menker Global Fatherhood Campaign that was created by Equimundo and Sonke Gender Justice. This campaign is reviewed in the family context as an example of involved fatherhood messages. So this message has been shown to help reduce the likelihood of perpetration of violence, showing that caring and nurturing fathers, they play a significant role in the healthy development of the child. And also other posters show relations between fathers and mothers. So for fathers to be more involved in the mother's health and well-being, and also in sharing some of the responsibilities around the household, helping to transform expectations for roles and behaviors in the household. So all of that reduces the likelihood of perpetration of violence and improve gender equity at the same time. So the context discussed many more concrete examples like this one to invite reflection on what can be adopted or adapted, as I mentioned. Included in the toolkit are also 2 discussion guides, one on prevention messaging in general and one on messaging for engaging men and boys in the prevention of violence against women. So these guides are intended to support, again, organizations and professionals, but instead of context, they are focused on audiences. So the context and the discussion guides can complement each other based on the work that you're doing. And they are specifically about how to create prevention messaging. They provide examples of messaging for different audiences groups, such as communities in general, adolescents and youth, messaging for couples and messaging for men, and messaging for young men and boys. The guides also include practical recommendations on what works well and what to avoid when developing these messages. And this is what we're looking at on the right side of the screen. And this was a component that was really well-liked by our communities of inquiry and reference group because they found that it highlighted interesting evidence in a way that they found practical and easy to follow. The guides end with reflection questions to facilitate thinking and conversation on these topics. across organizations or individually. The toolkit also includes a resource for news media professionals, and this material was designed to inspire gender transformative reporting approaches that will contribute to preventing violence against women. So it starts by discussing the role of the media in preventing violence and the need for gender transformative reporting. And discusses too that unfortunately many times the media has actually reinforced myths and stereotypes about the causes of violence, and that is what we're trying to move from as we try to develop and encourage gender transformative reporting. So to help envision what this looks like, the resource provides 4 recommendations for developing gender transformative reporting, which is what you are seeing here. So we are encouraging reporters to expose the underlying social drivers of violence against women and girls, and we discussed some of our research on that, but it's helping the audience understand that violence against women and girls is largely driven by gender inequality and the drivers that we have discussed. We are also recommending that they link violence against women to other forms of oppression and discrimination when they discuss these incidents, such as racism, colonialism, ableism, which we can see in many of the cases that are reported by the media, but these intersectionalities are not discussed. So it can really help shed light on the causes of violence and how they are interacting with other systems of oppression. We are also encouraging them to show violence as an important and urgent public health issue. And as Lorraine was saying, how this has been even declared as an epidemic in various jurisdictions across Canada. And finally, we are encouraging to promote respectful representations of women and girls in stories, not only about violence against women and girls, but many others, including representations of their bodies and sexualities. This can really help prevent violence against women and improve gender equity in the long run. Well, and as I mentioned, the toolkit also includes 2 background research summaries that were essential for developing these other resources. So, so that's the toolkit. And then the training that we developed, it was really meant to be an experience that helped learners create their own gender transformative messages. And for that, it provides foundational knowledge and concepts that they need to do that, but also steps and strategies for going about this work. So it has 3 units. As I mentioned, it starts discussing some of these concepts, what gender transformative approaches are, what primary prevention is, the drivers of violence, and how to use intersectional approaches when you need to, if you need to. And then it moves on to discussing strategies for creating these messages in a way that we hope you find really dynamic and engaging. We wanted to be very focused on this goal of helping them create gender transformative messages. And for that, the learning is supported through evidence from our research, but also examples of campaigns and messages, interactive exercises. We have even a problem tree template you can interact with, and some reflection moments too, to help learners ground what they are reviewing through the course. We had a lot of fun doing this course, and hopefully you'll enjoy it too. Okay, so where to find all of these products? The toolkit is already live at the project's website, which is communicatingequality.ca. The training will be launching soon, in the next week. The Leave the Mask messages will launch through the Center of Excellence Facebook and Instagram channels first, and then they will be added to on the website. We wanted to highlight that the website has a section in French where you can find all of these resources translated and discussed too, including the toolkit training and the Leave the Mask messages, static versions of them. So then this website, as we release these products, it will also evolve into a legacy website as we finish this project by the end of April of 2024. So yeah, this is where you can find all of this, and hopefully you can let us know what you think. There are many ways of contacting us, and on the website or on the Center of Excellence website. We'll love to hear what you think and whether this is useful for your work. I'm going to pass it to Lorraine to share some final remarks.
Thank you, Carol. The final message is, as we've said numerous times, that the violence against women and girls is not going away. It remains, as we say on our website, one of the most pressing issues of our time. And we think, therefore, it's really important to have this revolution in how we think about prevention, and really helping to school all of us up into a much deeper analysis of what the problems and drivers are and what some of the solutions might be, and really call people to act as individuals and as small groups of friends and as families and communities and as a society. So that's one part of our message, that this is not a problem that's going away at all. In fact, it manifests in more dire ways, it seems to me, every week, every day, not just in Canada, but around the world. And so gender transformative approaches, we think, are kind of the long vision here. But we do admit, as I said earlier, they're not easy to create. And so we've tried in this project to do our part in helping build that capacity. We've been doing this work for well over 10 years now, thinking about gender transformative messaging and programming and policy. And it's still, I think it's still very challenging to be clear, to do deep analyses, to show courage in saying what it is you think the radical analysis shows you, and then to be creative. If we could somehow package creativity and courage, I think it would really help us move this field forward. But at the end of the day, improving gender equity is important. It will always be important, and it does benefit all of us.